that corruption is coming on the forefront. But corruption has been, the way of life, in fact, the way of death in Uganda for the last close to 40 years since General Museveni took power. We have been raised in corruption, only that it gets worse and worse and worse every day. It started with bribing and taking bribes, then it went to embezzlement, then to bro-light theft. Now it is in looting levels. It's all brought by the sense of impunity, the idea of zero accountability to anybody. That's, beginning from the moral corruption, where leaders behave in whatever way they want, to political corruption, where you find people get votes being stolen, elections being rigged with impunity, people being shot and dead, unarmed civilians protesting, giving or taking bribes by the most respected people, including religious leaders. So this has been a way of life, although, of course, under General Museveni, scandals have become much worse. You won't mention a month that went scandal-free, not only in Parliament, everywhere. I'm only glad that the intellectuals of now are rising up. As a matter of fact, when I was in the ghetto somewhere talking to ghetto youths, they were, indifferent, wondering whether the elite of this world have only woken up to the corruption that is ongoing, not only the looting of public funds in Parliament or in other public offices, but even the moral corruption, a situation where people are picked, taken, and they disappear. And common people have always had the feeling of fighting and struggling alone. I'm only glad that eventually it's touching everywhere, and eventually people are rising up, especially young people, especially landed people, people on X here, on Twitter, educated people, knowledgeable people. And I'm even glad that it's cutting across. It is tribeless, it is partyless, and of course it's genderless and ageless. I'm very glad to be here, and I hope to have this interactive, hear from you, and also share my views. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Honorable Robert Chagulanyi. Now, now that you talked about the Gen Z that decided to take it on, you are yourself a millennial, and your generation has been talking about corruption, just like you said. Do you feel challenged that the Gen Z has rather chosen to take action?
Yes, I feel challenged, and it's a good thing. We should all be challenged. But I'm comforted by the words of Frantz Fanon, who said, every generation must discover its mission and then pursue it or betray it. It feels like this generation, a generation of Gen Zs, has discovered its mission, or rather led the mission, because it's supposed to be a mission of all people, from the baby boomers to the Gen Zs and even the generations to follow. It's a challenge that the younger people have taken it a notch higher to action. Our generation has been just speakers, but at least we've spoken about it. Of course, a few of us dared to take a step, but it takes multiple people. I'm just glad that this generation has approached it from a different perspective altogether. I hope they're not silenced. We try to take action, we continue to try to take action, but the resistance we get is the vulgarization of the cause and reducing it to politics. When one talks about corruption, the regime, all those that are beneficiaries of corruption are quick to reduce it to blackmail, to reduce it to politics. But, and they always, many times, get their way, because the people that are talking about it are the people that have either run for office or are running for office. So it is easy to twist it and say, these are politicians. seeking for their own interests. But now that young people that are clearly not seeking office or seeking any position of responsibility, but just feeling the pain and rising to the occasion is another thing altogether.
All right. As the leading opposition leader, and in terms and the team you lead, have you experienced any corruption? And if yes, how have you dealt with it? And what is the political cost of dealing with it?
I think the world has seen in recent times that corruption has cut across, including our own group that I lead. Yes, you have had some unsubstantiated claims, but also you've seen clear cases of corruption where one of our own, our former leader of opposition, got involved in a corruption scandal. It was very painful, but as a leader, I had to take a firm stand, and I'm very glad that the party stood along our values and we took action. Of course, yes, it comes with political costs. First, because corruption is the currency now, corruption is the fuel that is enabling those that rule over us to hold on to power. It is the exchange rate that people have to pay to stay in office. You know, we were disempowered. As a party, we appoint, we second somebody to go to the commission, and therefore, by virtue of the law, he who appoints can disappoint. However, this time we were disempowered and we could not recall the person that was involved in this corruption scandal. We could not recall them from the commission, even though we wanted. And this has been a benefit that has been given to the regime, by the regime, to all those people that have gone against our values. But not only that, corruption, like Honorable Senyonyi always says, when you fight corruption, corruption fights back. And corruption has gone as far deep as respected institutions. You will note that recently a few of our colleagues actually even tried to use the church and even our traditional institutions to cover corruption. Unfortunately, some people buy into it because here we're talking about money, and money corrupts even the most moral people. So we had to take a lot of precious time that we would have used to sensitize our people to free themselves, but we had to pause and then first make it clear that it is indeed corruption, and we are trying to ensure that we have integrity before we claim to give integrity to the people. So yeah, it has been a cost, a huge political cost, but it's worth it if we have to be leaders worth our salt.
All right, Mr. President. Precious, let me take on the president. I like that you mentioned that the leader of opposition, Right Honorable Joe Senyonyi, recently said, when you fight corruption, it certainly will fight back. Mr. President, given the country we are in, where the majority of us are actually poor, do we have what it takes to fight back when corruption fights back for us?
Yes, you do. You have what it takes. Your morality, your integrity. You have what it takes. You only need to make that firm choice. It's a costly choice because it comes with intimidation, it comes with brokenness, but at the end of the day, it comes with pride that does not equate to anything. So I want to encourage you and all other young people that you have what it takes to fight that corruption, because it can be fought and it can be defeated.
Right. I want to thank everyone who is listening in. We are having a talk with His Excellency Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu about corruption. Of recent, we have had youths from all walks of life, leaderless, religionless, partyless, members of NUP, members of the NRM, members of the FDC, coming together and saying, you know what, we have an urgent issue, which is corruption at hand. And I want to thank every youth, wherever you are, and you've decided to take chance or an opportunity in this. Mr. President, given what we've known about General Museveni, he aids and abates all wrongs. He's diametrically, he has been diametrically opposed to the position he has been taking. For example, in 1986, he said, the problem of Africa and in Uganda in particular is leaders that overstay in power. And he has overstayed in power. He has been coming out to condemn corruption, but again, condone it. Why do you think Museveni has been adamant to act against corruption, Mr. President?
On a platform like this, I'm trying to be as diplomatic as possible. But again, because I'm talking to young people, I want to be as blunt and as honest as possible.
Mr. President, we have always known you for being a realistic person. Yeah, so we hope you.
I believe that what stops General Museveni from practically fighting corruption is because he is corrupt himself. He was corrupted with power. There's this famous saying that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. General Museveni has absolute power, and that absolute power corrupted him absolutely. He cannot fight corruption because corruption is his biggest tool of control. He will pay lip service to the fight against corruption, but he will not fight corruption because it is corruption that is keeping him in power. It is the abuse of the law, which is corruption, that is keeping him in power. It is the rewardism, policy that he has, where even the most corrupt people, for as long as they can serve his purpose, he will keep them in office. I mean, look at Anita Among, a person that is not even politically smart, that she gives herself out every time. She has confessed to looting public funds numerous times, but she continues to wield power. You've seen Mike Mukola, you've seen Jim Muwonge, and many others. Corruption is what General Museveni uses. As a matter of fact, he has also said it numerous times that Anita Among helps him buy off opposition leaders to his side. So that still, will show you that General Museveni is not going to fight corruption. You've heard Mulyagonja, the former IGG, who said most corruption scandals are traced to General Museveni's footprint. I mean, doorstep. I was talking about the numerous scandals that you've seen, the Global Fund scandal of Jim Muwonge and Mike Mukola, up to the tune of 1.4 trillion was lost in between there. Nothing happened to them. They were instead rewarded. You remember the story of the junk helicopters in 1997, 45.4 billion lost, but because Salim Saleh helps him control the military, he ended there. It ended that way. The pension scam of 2010, you remember the likes of Jimero Amafa. You remember the Chogam scandal, including Sam Kutesa, his brother-in-law, something like that, including Gilbert Bukenya, including the likes of Nasser Sira. But because these people have always been his anchor in the population, you've had the scandals in the office of the Prime Minister. You've had the Valley Dam scandal. You've had NSSF Temangalo scandal. You've had scandal after scandal. But this is Uganda's way of life, in fact, way of death. So General Museveni has no will whatsoever to fight corruption because it's his tool.
But Honorable Kyagulanyi, you speak of Museveni, who recently, opened up an anti-corruption unit at URA. He has the IGG. He has the State House anti-corruption unity. He had the anti-corruption work. Don't you think he's willing to
before you even go on with all the institutions or pseudo institutions that he sets up? these are actually also windows of theft. I mean, you tell me that you are setting up a new anti-corruption unit to oversee the Uganda Revenue Authority, which loses 10 trillion every year, 10 trillion of our money, you know. But again, the person in charge of that unit is it David Karemera, the same person that was convicted, is a convicted, you know, tax fraudster. He's a convicted thief. But now you appoint a thief to ensure that nobody steals. It is a joke. It is an absolute joke.
I think Mr. Museveni is playing the game of set a thief to catch a thief. President Bobiwine, please speak about the cynicism from some influential people about the fight against corruption.
You see, you're throwing about words extravagantly. For example, you're calling them influential. They don't influence us. They don't influence us because we no longer follow them. Yes, there's been a lot of cynicism, and that is guilt talk. That is guilt talk from these corrupt members of parliament, corrupt leaders, including religious and traditional leaders. They know the truth, but because they are corrupt, and you see the corrupt people always know which kind of engine to grease. So they keep fueling that engine. No wonder corrupt people will steal money and go build the churches. Today, a church was being launched by Thomas Kaebwa, the same person who is under question. So you won't fail to hoodwink a few people. Radio presenters, TV presenters, so-called analysts, those armchair analysts, they will speak very good English, quote very smart laws in defense of corruption. Of course, ultimately, it fails that they have to deploy brute force to protect corruption. But all that cynicism is meant to do what young people these days call, I'm trying to look.
Mr. President, are you still with us?
Hello, can you hear me very well?
Yes, Mr. President.
Yes, I was saying that the people that are trying to be cynical are trying to do what the young people of these days call gaslighting. They're trying to make the people that are speaking up against corruption have a false sense of wrongness. They're trying to make them believe that they actually don't understand what they're talking about. That is the level of intellectual dishonesty that is being employed to defend corruption. Trying to victimize the victim.
Okay, Mr. President, you know, we've read comments where people say that someone that has been caught red-handed in corruption should deserve death penalties or should be jailed for this long. Some are so extreme to the extreme, some are too lenient, too weak. Mr. President, help us understand, what is NUP's policy about corruption or on corruption?
NUP's policy, like most political parties, I really don't want to talk about what we write or what we say. I want to talk about what we do. Of course, I will tell you that we have a zero tolerance policy to corruption, but that will only be words until we act on it. The NRM and all other political parties speak, you know, very morally until it's time to act. For us, we don't only speak about it, but we act with the little power that we have. And if we are to get more power, then you will see what moral people use power for. Of course, moral actions.
Thank you, President. We want to thank every Ugandan out there that is listening to us. We're still taking on His Excellency Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu. We say the legitimate president of Uganda. We're talking about, Uganda's corruption scourge. Mr. President, please help us understand what is keeping us away the informal sector from the corruption, peaceful protests. And what is the division? What causes the division in perspective of class? People look at corruption differently.
Thank you very much. That's a very, very important question. I hope we have some ghetto people on here as well. What is keeping away the Juakari, the informal sector, the ghetto people, the Kabayas of this world, the Edimutwes of this world? What is keeping them away? You see, we live in a society that is only uniting. And I'm very glad that's one victory of our generation, bringing together a generation, different tribes, different mentalities, different levels of education, different religious affiliations, but all of them united by the pain that they share. Clearly, we've all been sharing the same pains, but we had not connected as we are seeming to connect now. Initially, when myself and other people threw in our hat and came into leadership, the first stereotype was, Bobiwine now, and all that kind of thing. Of course, ultimately, we bonded, although there has been still a separation of mentalities, where when towards the 2021 election, you saw a lot of common people, a lot of border riders, the market vendors, Batembe, and all that coming into the politics. This scared the hell out of General 7. That for the first time, you saw drones, you saw abductions, you saw sodomy, you saw googling out eyes and plucking out teeth and cutting off of limbs. You saw extrajudicial killings because General 7 was so scared. And for a very long time, the common people have been, suffering, of course, fighting in their own common way that they understand. You will note that there was a time, sometime last year, when Dr. Besigye was so angry that he said that you, the intellectuals, are the problem of Uganda, because once you are comfortable in your, 2-bedroom house and a 6-figure salary, you are all right until you're not all right. So this was noted over time, that common people reached a time and thought our intellectuals are only on Twitter, are only on Facebook, are only online, and they don't come out. And again, because corruption has been so dressed out well, I don't call it corruption. Common people don't call it corruption. They call it theft, because it is theft. Somebody steals a whole road. Somebody steals a hospital, steals a school. Now they steal futures of the young people. So when the intellectuals, and please pardon me when I call all of you intellectuals, we live in a country where even when one speaks good English is regarded an intellectual. So when you rose to the occasion, the common people needed to connect with the theme. For them, they see corruption as a problem. But again, they have bigger problems. They don't even have the right to be human beings. They don't have a right to exist. They are fighting to exist. So according to them, corruption, especially the way they understand it, Okulienguzi, did not seem a very easily understandable problem. And that is why myself and many other people that explain have done and continue to do a great job to break it down for the people. I'm very happy about artists like King Saha, like Azawi, and many others. They've made it easy for the common people to understand. And with time, I see the two sides bonding and acting together.
Thank you, Mr. President. I love the fact that you help us understand this deeply. Honorable, tusobola tutya okumenyawo that bridge that is between, abageto feno wansi gye tuva kwoteeka ate ne bali bamambala masuuti ne tuba nga fena we are on the same page about corruption.
Wedde omanyi n'Oluganda. Kirungi nnyo, kizaamu amaanyi, wabula kye tulina okukola kwe kumakinga sure tukibreakinga down to make people understand. Ekintu ekyasinga okuleeta abantu mu byobufuzi, especially when people power and NUP came, kwe kuba nti twabringinga politics ku street, omuntu n'amanya ebyobufuzi bimukwatirako wa, n'amanya nti abo bonna byabufuzi balaba be basalawo bbeeyi gyagulamu sukaali, be basalawo bbeeyi gyagulamu akawunga, ate be basalawo wa mu ddwaliro waliyo omulagala oba tewali. Kati nekino ekya corruption, omuntu weetaaga omunnyonnyola nti oyo Anita Amongo essente zabbye oba ssente ze bamismanaginze emiliyoni 5 okweguliramu generator, ezo zibadde zisobola okuyamba health center yewammwe Rukunjiri oba ekanoni eggomba n'ebeera ng'erwaninga, zibadde zisobola okusasula abasawo. Ekyo bwe abantu bakina ki understandinga tekijja kulwanyisa corruption yokka, wabula kijja bayamba abantu okugetinga involved. Nzize nga kinnyonnyola abantu bonna nti gali amawanga amalala tegakulakulana kuba abantu bago abakulembeze balina empisa, no, kubanga abantu bali holding accountable. I'm trying to say that we need to make it clear to the young people of Uganda, especially from the ghettos, that other countries do not develop, or leaders in other countries don't do good simply because they are good. No, but because people hold them accountable. I would not say that President Ruto is a very good man, but he's doing good, he's respecting Kenyans because Kenyans are not taking crap from him. Now that we need to break it down for across all classes for them to understand that it affects us all if we sit back and relax, and it benefits us all if we rise to the occasion and equally demand what belongs to all of us. And finally, on that matter, it is important for all people to know that they are all taxpayers. You don't have to be a rich person to think that you're a taxpayer. Even the soda that you bought, the salt that you buy, everything you pay tax. So everybody should look at it, at themselves as a full taxpayer. So that is going to take people like you, Dr. Morgan, people like you, Good Girl, people like you, Aiden, and all of you friends that are here to try break it down more and more and more for the people. Like I was saying, for me, I see only positivity. When I see people like Judith Ad, when I see people like Saint Nelly, when I see people like religious leaders who are outspoken, people like Azawi, voices that are listened to, breaking this down to the common people, their fans who are in millions will follow suit, and they will sometimes even understand it better and pay even more interest. And that way, we'll be able to go from one step to another.
Thank you, Honorable Chagrani. Mr. President, you've talked about Kenya, you've talked about President Ruto letting the Gen Zs protest. But as we all know, it's a public secret where there is a swarm of people, demonstrating or protesting to capture the attention of the government or the president in power. There will be some self-seekers. We shall not say generally that Commission. Mr. Chagulanyi, if you were in power now, would you let the Gen Zs raise and demonstrate against corruption? And looking at the demands they have, for example, they are calling for the resignation of the Speaker of Parliament, which is the demand number one. They are calling for the resignation of the 4 backbench commissioners. They are calling for the reducing of the number of Parliament members. They are calling for any member of Parliament that has been caught involved in any corruption scandal should resign and be investigated. Number 5, they call for a live audit for all the members of Parliament and publicizing it. Number 6, they call for the cutting of salaries and allowances of all parliamentary members to 3 million, but also call for allowing Ugandans continuously, express or exercise their democratic right of peaceful assembly. Are these relevant?
Of course they are relevant. Of course they are relevant. I'll answer the first question. Would I let the Gen Zs protest? I want you people to know that your right is not given to you by the state. You have it. It's given by God, but you also have it enshrined in the Constitution. And this generation must be the last generation to even think that the right to protest for a right is granted by state. Nobody is going to call you to protest against them. You just have that right, and you should never let anybody make you believe otherwise. So it would not be upon me as president or anybody as president to allow people to protest or not. It is their right, you know. About whether the calls of the young people are justifiable and achievable. Absolutely, there's nothing that determined people cannot achieve. Absolutely nothing. And history has shown it. The reason why you see General Museveni deploying the military on the street is to stop you from starting, because when you start, he knows he will not be able to stop you. I mean, he will not be able to stop you from taking it to any level that you would want to take it. So you just have to go. You don't have to demand. I mean, you don't have to request. You don't have to beg for the right to protest for your rights. Let Kenya give you as an example. It is all achievable. And I think the first thing should be, of course, I hear them demanding the resignation of the speaker. That should have happened long time. The 4 backbench commissioners should have resigned long time ago. We saw some pseudo-intellectuals trying to castigate us for calling for the resignation of our comrade when he was found in that corruption scandal. I'm very glad that the whole nation can see it. But they should also call for the resignation of the so-called fountain of honor, because he is the chief priest of corruption. This is the person that is not only rewarding corruption, but facilitating corruption and defending corruption. So if you break the defense of corruption, then corruption will crumble like a pack of cards.
Absolutely right. We have NUP, and this is being the lead opposition party. I want us to understand in the context of how has NUP, being that it is the lead opposition party, other people love calling it being the lead option or the only option, how has it taken charge of fighting corruption and holding the government accountable in other areas, just apart from using the parliamentary front?
Like we said in the beginning, that we went to parliament not to be the opposition, because we actually won the election, but we were relegated to the opposition under the circumstances that, because of time, I won't go into. We use the parliamentary platform, but because it is very tightly controlled, you will see that when Anita Among is presiding over the House, she will use all manner of obscenities, all manner of humiliation to anybody that dares to raise a voice against corruption. It's only when Taebwa, and not that he's a saint himself, that he was sharing the House, that a few people like Alion were able to speak against corruption. Now, Parliament is only an institution. It's only one institution, which is also, under the grip of General Museveni. We believe in activism, and we have always been calling for protests against all, impunity, all abuses, not only corruption, but also human rights violations. Of course, you have always seen the response of the timid regime: brutality, abductions, extrajudicial killings, name it. But we continue. Like I'm saying, it is, I continuously say it because I believe that this has come as a blessing to see our political people rising to the occasion to fight corruption. I hope it does not end. I hope they don't compromise the young people, because that is what General Museveni does. They will call a few young people to have them denounce the cause, and that's the end of the story. But because now this is leaderless, I believe it will go on, because, I mean, how many people can General Museveni buy?
Okay, thank you, Mr. President, yet again for sparing time to talk to us. And I also want to thank Ugandans that have spared time to listen in to the President as he talks to us. As I conclude, Mr. President, one of the things that our generation that has learned from you is exposing the corrupt. Is, when we get information about any corrupt scandal is putting out, we the ghetto people, tukiita kulabisa. Kasita tufuna akamwanyi konna ne tutegeera nti kano kakyamu nga tukayiwawo ng'abantu bakategeera. Mr. President, ng'oggyeko okulabisa fe abantu abawansi mu ghetto, option ki gye tulina ng'ogasseeko n'abakulembeze mu kulwanyisa enguzi?
Ng'oggyeko okulabisa, okulabisa is the first step, because when you expose something wrong, you are going to awaken even those that were sleeping to rise to the occasion and fight against that evil. So exposure, kulabisa, temulekera kulabisa. But you can do much more than kulabisa. Bomalo kulabisa, gamba ne munno naye alabise, n'omulala naye alabise. Social media has played a huge role. No wonder Facebook is banned in Uganda. I hope Twitter won't be banned in Uganda. Reach out to them in person and personally, but most importantly, peacefully. Reach out to them, build study groups or teams of activists, not following any political party, but following morality and what you believe in as a person. And then do exactly what you young people have called for. We can't reinvent the wheel. It has always been demonstrating, picketing, and protesting. And that works. Historically, that is how slave trade was ended. That is how colonialism was ended. That's how dictatorship has ended in many places. And corruption is just, another terminology of wrongdoing, of impunity. Now, this is stealing with impunity. This is perverting, moral intentions with impunity. So protesting looks like is the ultimate for us. Of course, non-violent protests work a great deal. General Museveni has spent almost 40 years stockpiling weapons to fight against people, even those unarmed people. So the people that he fears most are the unarmed people, because they render his guns useless. And you will note that I'm talking about General Museveni a lot, because he is the presiding officer of all of this. We must not cheat ourselves to think that anybody else is doing this. Even Anita Mong, she's only a tool, like Kadaga was, like Kayihura was. You cannot just, yes, you'll blame Kayihura for the brutality and human rights violation, but for whom was he working? You can blame Anita Mong for the theft. Yes, she has stolen and she deserves all the sanctions. But under whose watch is she stealing and for whose benefit? Absolutely, General Museveni. So all these are only pawns that are being played. The master player, we know him and we know what corruption is benefiting him. And we know that once corruption stops, he will stop. Therefore, once corruption stops, he will fall. So he won't allow corruption to fall. We have to protest against corruption, but the root cause of corruption, we all know.
All right, Mr. President. Yes, Mr. President.
We should be keen on affairs of our country. Abducting people and disappearing them, that is corruption. Stealing public funds, that is corruption. Rigging elections, that is corruption. The police not doing their work and playing politics instead, that is corruption. So corruption comes in very many shades, and we must combat it in whichever way it comes.
The president says corruption comes in very many forms, and we must combat it in any way it comes. The march to parliament is still on. It is a nationwide peaceful protest where we, the people of Uganda, are going against the corruption that is, rampant in our country. Tomorrow, which is Monday, we shall have us go to courts to stand surety for our members that were arrested in the two physical peaceful protests that we had, one on Tuesday and another one on Thursday, and the same will happen on Tuesday. We shall be having going to court to stand surety for our friends and comrades that have been arresting for peacefully demonstrating, but also having an online protest. Wednesday, we shall hit the streets. Mr. President, are we here to see the Bobiwine of OTT?
First, it should not be about Bobiwine. Whichever Bobiwine shows up, now you know what you have to do. You cannot claim you don't know what to do. Reason why I even did not get involved immediately, no matter how much I was banning to join new people. Many of my colleagues are banning to join new people, but we don't want the naysayers to vulgarize it, to say, oh, now this is about Bobiwine. No, it must be about everybody. That's why for now, I'm just encouraging you. I am banning to join you, but I want people to understand that it is not about any political party and it's not about me. You were asking, sorry to take you a little bit aback, but you were asking, you were asking whether they will allow the protests or not. The question is not allowing protests. Just don't allow corruption. If corruption was fought, if the regime, if the government did not allow corruption, young people would not be in prison today because they would have no reason to protest against corruption. It's not about allowing protests. Don't allow corruption. If you've allowed corruption, then you have no more authority to stop protests that are fighting corruption. They wouldn't have left the corruption to go on in the first place. The reason why people are fighting themselves is because those that are supposed to fight corruption are instead shielding it.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Sorry, you had asked an even different question. Sorry, I diverted again. Would you mind asking the question again?
Yes, I asked you, are we here to see the Bobiwine of OTT, which you replied to us that as long as we have as many Bobiwines as
you
we
will see where freedom is concerned. Me, I have my personal issues. I am not free. I cannot sing in my own country. I cannot even go to church comfortably. So me, I have beef with this regime. And any part of me that is not free, be ready to see Chagulanyi, be ready to see Bobiwine, be ready to see Chibanda, be ready to see Mitembo, be ready to see Musingus. You'll see anybody. But make sure you rise to the occasion yourself. Don't leave it to me.
All right, Mr. President. The president gives us an assurance that anytime soon he will be hitting the streets with us. Remember, this is our constitutional right to demonstrate peacefully. So we call upon Ugandans from wherever you are to mobilize as much as you can. You know, we have always talked about how corruption affects us in all ways. We have seen painful stories on Twitter. We have seen how we lose parents in hospitals because the hospitals don't have generators. And yet, Among and Tayewa decided to buy themselves generators. We've seen a child hold a poster saying, you know what, one dress of Anita Among can build a better school for us. My co-host, are you good to go in with me? Precious? Precious seems to be having network problems. We shall be having some questions. Aiden, would you help me with getting people on board for questions for Honorable Chagulanyi? We want to continuously thank you for sparing time amidst your busy schedule to come and say a word or two to us. As we get to the speaker, Mr. President, can we talk about the artists that are silent? You are an artist.
What do I say? What do I say about artists that are silent? Of course, it's frustrating, it's disappointing. None of the artists can claim not to know what's happening. Like I've said, I always want to salute those that respect the pain of their people. People like Kingsa, people like Judith Hart, people like Azawi, people like people like Big Eye, people like Aziz Azion, people like, there are so many artists. You know, when we're talking about artists, let us not start from those that have betrayed their people. Let us start by thanking those that have stood with their people. Njagala nnyo okwebaza abo ba artists bonna. Saga kusokera kwabo abatunza abantu. Kansoke kwebaza abo abayimiridde ku mazima. Tubalaba bannange mwebale. Tuyinza obutabogerako nze kati ba artists abamu bambi mba saagala baleetera bizibu. Kati saagala kwogera ku mwana ono muto Azawi naye alina obwongo buli nga bwa muntu wa myaka 50. Kubanga alaba ebintu n'abyogera. And she's a girl, she doesn't need so much as a star. So we salute you, young lady, and many other artists. Abayimiridde ku mazima. We also have senior artists that would have otherwise used their voices, but they prefer comfort. They prefer to be comfortable. They are silent about the pain of their people until they are the victims. So while I salute the artists that have stood with their people, I know that some artists ought to look deep into their conscience and know that it is these common people that helped them rise. And if your people are not okay, you're also not going to be okay as an artist. And we should take examples from those that came before us.
Good evening, everyone.
Art, especially music, should be not only for entertainment, but also for betterment of society. So yeah, I don't want to speak so much about artists. Artists misunderstanding. Artists bagamba n'abavumi. Naye ngambera mbagamba amazima. Kuba oluvannyuma lwa byonna nabo bennyini bajja kukiraba. Ensonga lwaki ba artists abamu basirise kuba bali bought out. You remember there was 30 billion that was passed some time ago for apparently developing artists. Up to now, they cannot tell you what that money did. There was an effort to push for the copyright law to be amended. Esobolo kuyamba ba artists. Naine ba artists baba keeping nga beggars. So many of them are being used by the regime. No wonder you'll find them even when they know the truth. But we salute those that have stood for what is right.
Thank you, Mr. President. We'll also, as Ugandans, continue to applaud the artists. You know, there is a quote that says, the civilians of a country is not complete without its art. I don't know if I've said it right anyway. Brodokai Melissa Martin Jr.
Yes, my brother.
Martin?
Yes.
You said you have a question for the president.
Yes. First of all, I want to say thank you so much to Mr. President for providing yourself for this conversation. And I want to start, asking some of the things that you've commented on. One, you took on a very decisive action when you stood against Mpuga's corruption, suspended him from various positions and publicly addressing his corrupt practices. Despite his significant, experience and status in politics, you are like, hey, you did the wrong thing and I'm going to expose you. However, following these measures, Mr. Mpuga has publicly denied the wrongdoing on social media. He's going on mainstream media and denying, and he continues now to personally criticize you. He remains the member of the political party you lead. My question, number one question, how do you plan to address this situation? I mean, is there any appropriate consequences for his actions? And do we expect NUP to do anything? Does NUP has a disciplinary committee? What are they going to do, or what are you going to do? Number two, they're very short questions. I remember you said in one song, you said, my father said there's more politics in the music industry than in the parliament. Forgive them, Father. They don't know whom they're dealing with. And I understand probably where you were coming from. At that time, you were beefing with folks, probably you had started the music career almost at the same time frame. The likes of Bebe Cool and Chameleon. When you came to the politics, you almost applied the same approach. The question I want to ask you, how did you get all this confidence? Because, and why am I asking this question? There could be a Murisa from Zimbabwe who only has 20 followers on Twitter and is afraid to take on the folks of these people, you know, the likes of these folks who are well established, they're rich, they're famous, they have a following, and they're afraid. But when you came, join the politics, you are like, hey, I don't care about who you are. If you do a wrong thing, I'm going to stand against you and I will expose you. So what would you say to this? You know, there could be one who only has 10 followers and is afraid, oh, how do I attack? Or how do I even question a man who has over 500,000 followers on a social media platform? And then the last question, Mpuga is sort of, like you said, is gaslighting people. Now, he's asking for you to debate him. First of all, I find it extremely shameless. This is the highest level of a shtick or gimmick that is completely, I don't know, it's clowning of the highest level. I want to ask you a question. Are you going to debate Mpuga? Thank you.
Unfortunately, Mordecai, you did not ask. Debate about what? About whether or not corruption is good? Oh, I think,
Martin, did you?
I think we lost Mordecai. But I'll say that it would be absurd if we personalize this. This is not about my former deputy president or anybody else. It's about the evil of corruption. We stand against corruption, not against anybody. We don't stand up against Mpuga. We stand against corruption. And anybody that fits in that bracket, we stand against. Honorable Namboze made an analogy one of the interviews when she said, we used to throw stones to evil together. But when you get up one time and say, I am throwing stones at you, that means you crossed and went to the evil side. So we are not against anybody. We are against a vice, and that is corruption. And even when one of ours has been found culpable, we shall not have double standards. That's our policy. Mordecai also asked about what he seemed to term as bravery of taking on the wrongdoing in our politics. And imagine the person that has such a small following and they wonder whether they can dare to take on the powers that be. I'll tell you, Mordecai, the one man said, and I agree with him, that one man plus the truth is the majority. So if you stand by the truth, you will have majority of the people. A few who stand for the wrong might be outspoken, they might be powerful, but ultimately the truth prevails. It never loses a fight. The truth has never lost a fight. So yeah, stand for what is right, and you'll be shocked how many people you will be representing. You will be shocked how many people will come to stand against you. I mean, here we come. We are standing against Africa's most brutal dictator who has been in power for almost 40 years. Bank of Uganda is in his hands. UPDF is in his hands. When you go against Museveni, you are going against Uganda Revenue Authority, you're going against Uganda Police, you're going against Parliament of Uganda, you're going against all, institutions, including those that are not government institutions. But nevertheless, we take him on. And we are constantly surprised that we wake up alive every other day. The truth is more powerful, and there's also God. I know we have some atheist people here, but you know that there's God, and God always stands on the side of the truth. So that's one thing that keeps us going. And finally, you still were asking how we are going to deal with those that have been found culpable of corruption in our party. You know, unlike I numerously quote Honorable Senyonyi, that when you fight corruption, corruption fights back. And in fact, in most cases, corruption fights back very ferociously. You notice that ever since we brought that scandal to the limelight, there's been a lot of empowerment from the government side to cause divisions and fights within the party that we lead. We couldn't do so much because Madam Anita Mong, with her impunity, you saw her twisting all the rules to keep her fellow culprits in office. We couldn't do so much with our constitution. As you know, that our party constitution, after we amended it, it was supposed to be ratified by the Electoral Commission, and we can't use it to hold some people accountable for now. However, our biggest resource has always been the people, and we've thrown these people back to the population. And I'm sure you've been seeing the population dealing with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, for taking on Mordecai. Actually, Mordecai is an atheist. He doesn't believe in God. We're joined by APAS. APAS, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, Mr. Bagonza.
Greetings to everyone on the space. It's a blessing. Greetings, His Excellency.
Greetings, my brother.
Yes, we give thanks. First of all, I would like to thank Bobiwine for always standing and always championing causes like this because he cares for the country. And I would also like to thank, personally, I'm not even going to say much, but I would like to thank the people that are standing, because the youth are resolute because they are hungry for the truth, you know, and they're hungry for change in how our members of parliament are acting, most of our leaders are acting. They are resolute because they are hungry for that, and the leaders still refuse to do what they ought to do. They instigate and abuse when they ought to diffuse the problems that are piling up on me and you. And then they seemed shocked by the things we choose to do, as if we weren't supposed to be offended by their moves. Guys, we're offended by how these people move, and it's really sad that they want to tell us how to react. How can you ask me to react the way you want me to react when what you're doing is wrong? People are placed in positions to actually make sure that the life of Ugandans is easier, is softer. People can find a way to actually feel happy being in their country. People in Uganda no longer feel like you can make it in Uganda. That's why so many people are leaving Uganda. You have so many bakadama. Why you're having all these things happening is because people don't have hope in making it down here. But politicians have hope every single day, because every money that comes in, that they get, all this money that they get, foreign funding that should help the many, helps the few. And it's really sad. And when you see our own president stand and be against us when we're actually championing this cause, saying, you know what, we do not like what you guys are doing. The president of Uganda came into power saying that he's fighting things like corruption and unfairness. When we come and say we're fighting that, he should be joining us immediately. Because what we are fighting for is the thing he stood for when he was coming into power. It's only right for him to also be on our side, but he's not. Because I think he's very, very aligned with the people who are doing what they are doing. And then he pretends that he cares, that there is change or there is corruption, it's really, really bad. We had a march. He also had a march. Why shouldn't people march to the parliament when they are actually showing that they are frustrated by the parliamentarians? Why? Why should it be hard? Why should people be in prison? As we speak, we have so many of our friends in there, and it's really, really sad. I pray that a day comes where many of us can stand, because the problem we have is that whenever some stand, others don't stand. And it's really one of the things that really hurts the most. The first time we had a match with Bobiwine were so many people. And the time came for us to actually move, and we were like 10, to be honest. We were joined by other people as things were going on who didn't even know what we were up to. But because of our voice and what we came up with, they joined us. I just pray that many of us stand, because what we are standing for is a noble cause. It's not something that we are trying to hate on Museveni. Personally, I don't hate the president. I hate his doing. I hate how he runs the state, but I don't hate him as a man. There's no hate in my heart. I don't think I would feel like, oh, you know what, I don't like the president. We respect him as an elder, but we don't respect his acts. We do not respect how he runs the country. We do not respect how he protects the people who do evil to the country and the people. Because what is going to happen is that, and we all know, this is what I'm telling you, something you already know. We all know that every money that is coming from outside Uganda to come here and help us, that is actually stolen and all that, it's us that are going to pay it. We, the younger people, these people are going to be dead already. It's going to be us to suffer. And if we don't stand now, before things get worse, we have a problem. And most of these parliamentarians have to be put to book.